The fat billionaire everyone avoided found love with the most beautiful woman. He was the billionaire everyone whispered about, avoided for the body he carried, while she was the woman every man desired but no one truly saw. What happens when loneliness meets beauty, and love dares to bloom? Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. If you're tuned in and ready to dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So, let's get started. The limousine's tinted windows reflected a distorted image of Arthur's face as he stared out at the city. Glass towers gleamed beneath the afternoon sun, their shadows stretching like cold fingers across the sidewalks where people rushed past, never once glancing his way. He had everything: a fleet of cars, private jets, an empire that newspapers called untouchable. Yet when he stepped into a room, silence often followed. Eyes slid away, conversation shifted, and the same wordless judgment returned. He was too big, too strange, too easy to mock behind closed doors. Arthur adjusted his cufflinks, a nervous habit he could never shake. The car slowed outside one of his hotels, a palace of glass and marble he rarely visited except for meetings. His assistant chirped reminders in his earpiece. Board meeting at 3. Dinner with investors at 8. Oh, and sir, remember the gala invitation. They're expecting you. He sighed. They expect my money, not me. No one argued with him. They never did. Across the city, sunlight filtered through lace curtains, scattering golden patterns across Merida's mirror. She sat at her vanity, brushing her long hair with practiced grace. Her phone buzzed endlessly. Messages from admirers, event coordinators, men offering promises cloaked as invitations. She smiled politely at each but felt nothing. To the world, she was dazzling, a goddess in every room. People stopped to stare at her beauty, but no one stayed to ask what weighed behind her eyes. Merida longed for someone to see beyond the flawless surface, to notice the way her laugh sometimes faltered, or how her silences lasted longer than her smiles. But instead, her beauty was a cage. Every compliment built another bar, every admirer another lock. When she stepped into a cafe later that morning, heads turned as they always did. The waiter nearly dropped his tray. A young man nudged his friend, whispering too loudly. She sat by the window, ordering tea with a soft voice, pretending not to hear. She was used to being a spectacle, yet desperately unseen. Back at the hotel boardroom, Arthur's presence filled the space before he spoke. The directors stiffened, glancing at one another, waiting for him to explode as he sometimes did when numbers disappointed. Today, he didn't. He leaned heavily against his chair, his breath shallow, his mind elsewhere. The truth was, Arthur had grown tired of the game. Wealth had given him control, but never peace. People praised him for his empire but avoided sitting too close, avoided laughing too openly in his company, as though kindness might make them vulnerable too. During the meeting, one executive slipped and muttered under his breath, "If only he took himself as seriously as his money." Arthur heard it. He always heard it. He clenched his fist beneath the table, the gold of his ring biting into his palm. The room moved on, but the words stayed. That evening, both lives unfolded in parallel solitude. Merida walked along the pier, wind tugging at her dress, sea spray cooling her skin. Families laughed nearby, couples strolled hand in hand, but she walked alone. People smiled at her, waved politely, some even stopped to compliment her beauty, but none stayed long enough to ask about her heart. Meanwhile, Arthur sat in his penthouse, a glass of scotch untouched on the table, staring at the city lights blinking like distant stars. His reflection in the window mocked him, a man who could buy anything but affection, who wore power like armor and loneliness like chains. He pressed a hand to the glass as though trying to reach something beyond the glittering skyline. He longed to be seen, not avoided. Their worlds were hurtling toward collision, though neither knew it yet. The gala invitation both had received was printed in gold letters, the kind of event where fortunes were displayed and appearances mattered more than sincerity. For Arthur, it was another performance, another evening of pretending not to hear the whispers. For Merida, it was another exhausting night of suitors and shallow praise. Yet destiny had a strange way of weaving two invisible threads together. Soon, in a room filled with masks and judgments, the billionaire everyone avoided and the woman everyone admired would meet, shattering the silence of their separate prisons. If you were in Arthur's shoes, wealthy but constantly judged, or in Merida's place, admired but never truly seen, which life would feel lonelier to you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The ballroom glittered like a palace. Chandeliers spilled gold light across polished marble, violins hummed in the background, and servers wove between guests carrying silver trays stacked with champagne. The gala was one of the city's most anticipated nights, where fortunes were flaunted, connections forged, and appearances were everything. Arthur arrived in silence, his presence as commanding as it was unwanted. The whispers started before he crossed the threshold. That's him. The fat billionaire. All that money, but look at him. His tuxedo strained slightly at the shoulders, the fabric hugging his body uncomfortably, but his eyes held a quiet storm. He walked past the gawking stairs, each step heavy with defiance, his cane tapping against the floor like a drumbeat of war. He thought of leaving immediately, slipping away before the humiliation settled in, but pride anchored him. If they would not respect the man, they would at least respect the empire. Merida entered moments later, and the atmosphere shifted as though the room inhaled collectively. Every head turned. Her gown was a cascade of silver silk, shimmering under the chandelier's glow. Men fumbled with their glasses, women glanced in envy, and the crowd parted like waves to let her through. She smiled, gracious yet distant, her heart already weary of the same rehearsed compliments that would soon rain down. For an instant, across the crowded ballroom, her eyes met Arthur's, and she froze. He wasn't staring the way the others did. There was no hunger, no calculation, no smirk of conquest. Instead, his gaze carried something raw, pain disguised as power, loneliness heavy as stone. He looked away quickly, embarrassed at having been caught. That flicker unsettled her. The evening dragged with its usual routines: introductions, polite laughter, hollow conversations. Arthur stood by a corner, ignored except when someone wanted a donation. Merida danced politely with suitors, her smile practiced, her heart absent. Then it happened. A group of young men at the bar, emboldened by drink, began whispering too loudly. Their words sliced through the air, directed at Arthur. Imagine all that money and still looking like that. Bet he's never had a woman without paying for it. Who'd want him? Arthur stiffened, pretending not to hear, though every word burned. His jaw clenched, his hands shook around his glass. He wanted to walk away, but humiliation rooted him in place. Merida, standing nearby, caught the exchange. Something inside her snapped. She turned sharply, her voice carrying across the room. Maybe if you had his discipline, his brilliance, his courage to show up despite cowards like you, people would whisper about you instead. The ballroom stilled. The young men flushed red, fumbling with their drinks, unable to meet her eyes. Arthur blinked, stunned. No one had ever defended him in public. Not once. Merida's gaze lingered on him, softer now, almost apologetic, as if she hadn't meant to expose him but couldn't stay silent either. For a brief moment, the noise of the gala dulled, and it was just the two of them standing in the eye of a storm. Later, as the crowd buzzed with speculation about her outburst, Arthur found himself drifting toward her, driven by something he couldn't name. "Why did you do that?" he asked quietly, his voice rough, unsteady. Merida tilted her head, meeting his eyes. "Because they were wrong." He almost laughed. "People have been saying worse about me for years. It doesn't matter." Her brow furrowed. "Then why did your hand tremble?" The question struck like lightning. He opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came. No one had ever noticed, let alone cared enough to call it out. She didn't press further. Instead, she offered a small, genuine smile. "You don't have to pretend with me." For the first time in years, Arthur felt the ground shift beneath him. A stranger, a beautiful stranger admired by all, had looked past the armor and glimpsed the man underneath. It terrified him, and it pulled him closer. The night ended with them standing apart again, neither daring to bridge the distance. Arthur left early, retreating to the safety of solitude. Merida lingered. her thoughts circling the man who had surprised her simply by existing differently than everyone else. Both carried something home that night, a spark neither wanted to admit, a disturbance in their carefully built walls. If you were in Merida's shoes, would you have spoken up for Arthur in front of everyone? Or stayed silent to avoid the scene? Comment below with what you would have done. The next morning, Arthur sat in his penthouse office, staring at a pile of untouched contracts. His mind replayed the gala, over and over, the way Merida's voice had sliced through the cruelty, the way she had looked at him without mockery. It unsettled him. He wasn't used to kindness, especially not in public. For years, he had built walls so high that people rarely attempted to climb them. And yet, one woman's single act of defiance had cracked the fortress. He slammed the contracts shut, frustrated at himself. She's just like the rest. Beautiful, admired, out of reach. Don't fool yourself, Arthur. Meanwhile, Merida sat at her kitchen table, sipping tea, her phone buzzing with endless notifications. Articles were already circulating. Merida defends Billionaire in bold gala moment. Photos of her standing tall, her silver gown shimmering under chandeliers, had gone viral. She sighed. Some praised her courage, others mocked her choice of who to defend. Her agent called, warning her about reputation risks. But Merida wasn't worried about headlines. What lingered was the image of Arthur. His clenched fist, his trembling hand, his silence. She had seen something no one else seemed to care about. His hurt. And yet she chastised herself. Don't get involved. You know how this ends. Men like him, powerful, wounded. They pull you in and leave scars. Still, she couldn't shake the thought of his eyes when he asked, "Why did you do that?" Arthur threw himself into work, trying to bury the echo of her words. Meetings, phone calls, contracts. He filled every hour with noise. But silence always crept back. That night, he caught his reflection again, broad shoulders hunched, tie loosened, eyes tired. He muttered, "She doesn't mean anything." It was a moment, nothing more. But deep down, he knew it was a lie. Days passed. Merida received another invitation, a charity project for children, funded by Arthur's foundation. She almost declined. Her life was already packed with events and appearances, most of them shallow. Yet something tugged at her curiosity. Against her better judgment, she accepted. When Arthur saw her name on the list of attendees, his chest tightened. He considered canceling, pretending to be too busy, letting his staff handle it. Why risk seeing her again when he was barely holding himself together after the gala? But walking away felt like cowardice. He had built empires on facing what others feared. He couldn't retreat from one woman's kindness. The charity event buzzed with laughter as children ran between tables stacked with books and art supplies. The air smelled of crayons and cookies, the kind of simple joy Arthur had long forgotten. When Merida arrived, dressed simply this time, she blended into the warmth rather than outshining it. Her beauty was still undeniable, but here she looked softer, almost freer. Their eyes met across the room. Both froze. Arthur looked away first, his chest tight. Merida hesitated, then forced herself to focus on the children. Don't complicate this. He'll never let you close. For the rest of the afternoon, they circled each other like wary shadows. Polite nods, fleeting glances, unspoken words. At one point, a child tugged on Merida's dress. "Miss, will you read this story to us?" She smiled, kneeling as a dozen little faces gathered around. Her voice carried warmth, rising and falling with the tale, laughter rippling through the group. Arthur stood at a distance, watching. For the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Hope. But hope was dangerous. When Merida finished, the children clapped, hugging her. She glanced up and caught Arthur watching. Their eyes locked again. This time she didn't look away. Later, as the event wound down, they found themselves at the same refreshment table. The silence stretched. "You didn't have to come," Arthur muttered, reaching for a glass of water. "I wanted to," she replied. He shook his head. "No, you wanted to prove to yourself you're the kind of woman who stands up for the lonely fat man at parties. That's noble, but unnecessary." Her eyes narrowed. Is that what you think of me? I don't know what to think of you, he admitted, his voice low, rough. For a moment neither spoke. The hum of the room faded, leaving only the weight of their words. Merida finally broke the silence. You push people away before they can hurt you, don't you? His chest tightened. Better that than being humiliated. Her voice softened. But what if not everyone wants to hurt you? Arthur had no answer. He turned, leaving before she could see the storm brewing in his eyes. That night, both lay awake in separate beds, restless. Merida whispered into the dark. Why do I care? Arthur whispered into his pillow. Why can't I stop thinking about her? Neither dared to admit the truth. The spark had already lit a fire, and resisting it only fed the flames. Rain poured over the city, streaking the streets with silver. The storm had arrived earlier than forecasted, flooding intersections, stranding cars, and trapping dozens inside the Grand Community Center where Authors Foundation had hosted the charity event. The guests complained, pacing with their phones in the air, searching for signal. Children dozed on beanbags, parents huddled near windows, while staff scrambled to find blankets and snacks. Arthur stood near the entrance, glaring at the sheets of rain hammering the glass. His driver had called, roads were impassable. He wasn't going anywhere. Perfect, he muttered, loosening his tie. Behind him, a voice replied, calm but tinged with humor. You'd think a billionaire would have bought the weather by now. He turned. Merida stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her hair slightly damp from the sprint she'd made inside. Even in the storm's chaos, she carried a quiet composure. Arthur's chest tightened. Of all the people stranded with him tonight, it had to be her. Hours stretched. Volunteers handed out sandwiches and water. The storm roared outside, relentless. Arthur had retreated to a corner, occupying himself with emails, though his screen remained unread. Merida eventually approached, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She set one down in front of him. I didn't ask for that, he said. You didn't have to, she replied, settling into the chair beside him. Silence hung between them, filled with the muffled thunder and chatter of stranded guests. Finally, she spoke. You don't like people doing things for you, do you? He glanced at her, brow furrowed. Because it always comes with a price. And what's my price? He studied her carefully, searching for mockery or hidden agenda. But her eyes held only curiosity. It disarmed him more than any insult ever could. A volunteer passed by, recognizing Merida, gushing compliments about her films, her beauty, her perfect smile. She accepted politely, though her jaw tightened. When the volunteer left, Arthur remarked quietly, You hate it. Her head turned. Hate what? Being worshipped. You smile, but your eyes go dead. Merida froze. No one had ever said it so plainly. How did you see that? She whispered. He shrugged. Because I know what it's like to be looked at and not truly seen. The words settled between them like a secret neither wanted but both understood. Time crawled. A generator flickered, plunging the hall into partial darkness. Children squealed, some crying. Without hesitation, Merida moved to gather them, pulling out her phone flashlight, leading them into a circle. She began telling a story, her voice rising above the storm, weaving magic into fear. Arthur watched from the sidelines, his chest aching. Her beauty wasn't in the shimmer of gowns or the attention she commanded at galas. It was here, in the way she made frightened children forget the storm. Something stirred in him he hadn't felt in years, admiration untouched by cynicism. Later, when the children finally slept, Merida returned to him. You watched me, she said softly. Everyone watched you. No, she pressed. You watched me. He swallowed hard. Because you remind me what kindness looks like. Her breath caught. For a moment, neither moved. The storm outside roared, but between them, silence deepened into something fragile, dangerous, and real. A crash of thunder rattled the building, and without thinking, Merida's hand reached for his. His instinct was to pull away, but he didn't. Their fingers touched briefly, then lingered. Arthur's heart pounded, every instinct screaming to retreat, to protect himself. But for the first time, He didn't listen. And Merida, staring into his guarded eyes, realized she wasn't afraid of the man people avoided. She was afraid of how much she wanted to know him. Hours later, when the storm finally eased and the streets reopened, guests rushed out, eager to return home. But Arthur and Merida lingered, reluctant to break the fragile connection forged in the storm's shadow. As they finally stepped into the damp night air, Arthur whispered, almost to himself, maybe being stranded wasn't the worst thing after all. Merida smiled faintly, her voice carrying warmth he hadn't known he craved. Sometimes storms bring people where they need to be. The rain-soaked night had passed, but its echoes lingered. For days, Arthur found his thoughts circling Merida, the way her hand had brushed his, the way her voice had steadied frightened children, the way she saw past what everyone else refused to. He hated how much space she occupied in his mind. And yet, when she accepted his hesitant invitation to visit his foundation's headquarters, he felt both relief and dread. Merida arrived one afternoon, dressed simply, her hair tied back, carrying the calm grace that made every room shift when she entered. She was escorted into his private office, an expansive space of glass walls, leather chairs, and city views stretching endlessly. Arthur stood by the window, his reflection fractured across panes of glass. He didn't turn immediately. "You came," he said, voice low. "You asked," she replied, settling into a chair. "Why wouldn't I?" He finally faced her, his eyes shadowed. "Most people avoid me unless they need something." Her gaze softened. "Maybe I'm not most people." They spoke at first of safe things, the charity's goals, the children's needs, the logistics of building more centers. But beneath every word lay an unspoken current. Finally, Merida set her papers aside. "Tell me something, Arthur. Why do you let them define you?" His brow furrowed. "Them. The people who whisper. The ones who mock. You hear them, don't you?" Silence. His jaw tightened. "You're brilliant," she continued. "But you walk into every room already carrying their judgment on your shoulders." He exhaled sharply, leaning against the desk. "You think it's that simple? That I can just ignore a lifetime of it?" Her voice softened. "Then tell me what they don't see." The room grew heavier. For a moment, Arthur looked like he might dismiss her, retreat into sarcasm or silence. But then something in her gaze, steady, patient, unafraid, broke through. He turned to the window, his voice quieter than she had ever heard it. "When I was 12, I was the biggest boy in my class. Kids laughed. Teachers pretended not to notice. My father told me to toughen up, that weakness wasn't allowed in our family. So I learned to hide it. I laughed along sometimes. Pretended it didn't matter." He swallowed hard. But it did. Every word. Every stare. Every time a girl recoiled like I was something disgusting. I buried it under money, power, control. But no matter how high I built, the whispers climbed higher. Merida's chest tightened. She saw not the billionaire, but the boy he had been, lonely, desperate to be accepted, carrying wounds that never healed. She reached across the desk, her hand hovering near his. "Arthur." But he pulled back abruptly, the walls snapping up. "That's enough." Merida's heart ached. She wanted to push, to tell him he didn't have to hide, but she knew he would only retreat further. Instead, she decided to share something of her own. "You think I don't understand," she said softly. "But I do. Just differently." He glanced at her, skeptical. She inhaled. "When I was 16, I entered a small pageant in my hometown. I didn't care about winning, I just wanted to belong. But the moment I stepped on stage, something happened. People stared. They saw beauty I hadn't even realized I carried. From then on, that's all they saw. Not my thoughts, not my fears, not my dreams. Just a face. A body. A prize to be won." Her voice cracked. "I've been adored my whole life, but I've never been known." Arthur blinked, stunned. He had never considered that beauty could be its own kind of prison. For the first time, their wounds aligned. His for being judged as too much, hers for being reduced to not enough beyond her looks. Silence lingered. heavy yet strangely comforting. Two people stripped of masks, if only for a moment. Finally, Arthur whispered, "Maybe we're both just trapped in different cages." Merida nodded, her eyes glistening. Maybe the key is the same, someone willing to see past the bars. Their gazes locked, the air charged. For a fleeting second, it felt like the world had narrowed to the space between them. But Arthur, terrified by the intensity, looked away. "Don't romanticize me, Merida. You'll only regret it." Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. "What if I don't?" The meeting ended abruptly, Arthur retreating into the safety of work, Merida leaving with questions swirling in her heart. Yet something had shifted irreversibly. Their backstories were no longer hidden. They had seen each other's scars. And scars, once revealed, cannot be unseen. The next time they met, it wasn't in a ballroom filled with whispers or an office heavy with confessions. It was at the Children's Center. Bright walls painted with murals, tiny shoes scattered near the door, laughter echoing down the hallways. Merida had come to volunteer. Arthur, against his own instinct, had come to oversee. When their eyes met in the playroom, something unspoken passed between them. Not the tension of the gala, not the raw ache of backstories shared, but something gentler. Arthur found himself sitting cross-legged on the carpet, awkward in his expensive suit, surrounded by blocks and crayons. A little girl tugged at his sleeve, demanding he build a castle. His large hands fumbled with the small pieces. Frustration etched across his face. Merida watched, smiling. "You're terrible at this." He scowled, though a hint of amusement flickered. "These blocks are defective." "No," she laughed, kneeling beside him, her hair brushing his arm. "You're just overthinking it. Watch." With deft fingers, she stacked the blocks with ease, her tongue peeking out in concentration. Children giggled, cheering her on. Arthur shook his head. "Show off." Her laughter spilled out, light, unguarded, contagious. And before he could stop himself, Arthur chuckled too. The sound startled him. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed without bitterness. Later, they sat on a bench outside, the late afternoon sun warming their faces as children played nearby. "You were good with them," Merida said softly. Arthur scoffed. "I nearly crushed their toys." "No," she corrected. "They loved you. They saw past everything the world says about you." He went quiet, her words sinking deeper than he wanted to admit. "And you," he said after a pause, "you're different when you're here. No cameras. No admirers. Just you." Merida smiled faintly. "Maybe that's why I come. It's the only place I can breathe." Their eyes lingered, the silence between them no longer heavy but soothing, like a pause that didn't need filling. As the afternoon waned, they strolled through the garden behind the center. The air smelled of roses, damp earth, and possibility. "Do you ever wonder," Merida asked, "what life would have been like if people had just seen us for who we are?" "All the time," Arthur admitted. She glanced at him. "And do you think we'd be happier?" He considered. Maybe not. Maybe pain is what makes us notice each other now. Her chest tightened. He was right. Their scars were the very reason they could recognize each other's humanity. A sudden drizzle began, soft and unexpected. Merida tilted her head back, letting raindrops dot her cheeks. "You're not running inside?" Arthur asked, incredulous. "No," she said with a grin. "Why waste a good rain?" Before he could argue, she tugged his hand. His instinct was to resist, but her laughter pulled him along. Soon they were walking through the drizzle, shoes splashing in puddles, her silver laugh mingling with the rhythm of raindrops. He stared at her, hair damp, face alight, utterly unbothered by appearances, and something inside him unraveled. "I don't understand you," he murmured. She glanced at him, smiling softly. "Good. Then you'll have to keep trying." Back inside, dripping but laughing, they sat by the window, steam rising from mugs of tea. Arthur studied her, his voice quieter now. "You make things lighter." Merida's gaze softened. "And you make them real." For a moment, the world outside blurred. His hand brushed hers on the table, and this time neither pulled away. The bond was fragile, new, but undeniably real. As evening settled, Merida prepared to leave. She paused at the door, turning back. "You know, Arthur, you don't have to be alone in this." He swallowed hard, the walls inside him trembling. "And you don't have to keep pretending your beauty is all you are." Their eyes locked, a silent promise weaving between them. For the first time in years, both felt it, that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible. The bond had grown fragile but real. Moments of laughter in the rain, warmth in shared silences, the comfort of finally being seen. For Arthur, it was the closest thing to peace he'd ever known. For Merida, it was the first time someone looked at her and didn't see a prize, but a person. And just as they began to believe in it, the world intervened. It started with a headline: Merida's new romance. Is the billionaire just her latest role? The article spread like wildfire. Tabloid photos of her laughing beside Arthur in the rain, smiling at him in the children's center, her hand brushing his. The captions were cruel. Beauty and the Beast? Or Beauty and the bank account? Arthur sat in his office, the paper crumpled in his trembling hands. His phone buzzed with messages, investors mocking, acquaintances warning him, strangers on the internet tearing him apart. "She's using you." Just another actress playing a part. Every word reopened old wounds. When Merida arrived at his office that afternoon, she carried the same paper, her expression stricken. "Arthur, I didn't." He cut her off, his voice sharp. "You think I'm blind? You think I don't know how this looks?" Her eyes widened. "I don't care how it looks. I care about you." "Don't," he snapped. "Don't pretend you care. This is exactly what everyone warned me about. The beautiful woman who plays savior, then walks away with the story of a lifetime." Pain flared in her eyes. "Is that really what you think of me?" His fists clenched. "What else am I supposed to think? People like you don't end up with people like me. Not without a price tag attached." The words echoed, harsher than he intended, but fueled by years of scars. Silence thickened. Merida stepped back, her voice breaking. "I stood up for you when no one else would. I let you see parts of me no one else has. And still, you can't see me." He looked away, unable to bear the hurt on her face. She shook her head, tears glistening. "You're not the man I thought you were." She turned and walked out, the sound of the door slamming reverberating through his chest like thunder. That night, Arthur sat alone in his penthouse, lights off, city glowing below. Her words replayed in his mind. "You can't see me." He drowned the ache with whiskey, but it didn't silence the truth. He had pushed away the only person who had ever looked past his armor. Yet another voice whispered cruelly inside him. Better to end it now than be left later. At least this way you controlled the fall. Merida, meanwhile, curled on her sofa, scrolling through the endless headlines. Comment sections teemed with venom. Of course she's using him. He's pathetic if he thinks she loves him. She threw the phone aside, tears streaming. She had tried to show him he was worthy of love, but instead, he had chosen his fear over her truth. For the first time, she wondered if her beauty and his wealth weren't cages but walls too high to climb. Days passed. Neither reached out. Arthur buried himself in work, but his chest felt hollow. Boardrooms echoed emptily, meetings blurred, food tasted of ash. The mansion felt like a tomb. Merida returned to her world of cameras and flashing lights, but her smiles were hollow, her eyes haunted. Every time someone praised her beauty, it felt like a wound instead of a compliment. Both had touched something real, only to let it shatter in their hands. The lowest point had come. Love, once possible, now seemed like a cruel mirage. The city pulsed with its usual rhythm. Cars streaming, lights blinking, people moving. But for Arthur, everything felt muted, like he was watching the world through glass. He sat in his penthouse library, the fire flickering in the hearth though he hadn't lit it himself. Books lined the walls, volumes he had collected but never read, as though knowledge could fill the void inside. But nothing filled it now. The silence screamed with her absence. Merida's laughter haunted him, the way she had danced in the rain, the way her eyes softened when she told him she wanted to be known. And then her voice, sharp with betrayal. You can't see me. He pressed his palms into his eyes. For so long, he had believed pushing people away was protection. Now he saw it clearly, it was a cage. And he had locked himself inside. But the question gnawed at him. Could he dare step out? Could he risk the possibility that Merida's love had been real, when every scar inside him screamed it was impossible? Across the city, Merida sat at her vanity, makeup half-wiped, phone buzzing with messages she ignored. The mirror reflected her flawless face, the face the world adored. But tonight she saw none of that. She saw emptiness. Her heart replayed Arthur's words like a cruel melody. People like you don't end up with people like me. She wanted to hate him, but she couldn't. She understood his fear, his scars, his self-doubt. And wasn't she the same? A woman who pushed away suitors because none saw her for who she was? Arthur had seen her, or at least tried. Until fear blinded him. Tears blurred her reflection. Why am I still holding on? She whispered. The answer came quietly, like a truth she'd always known, because he mattered. Because love, real love, is never easy. Days bled into nights, both of them wandering their private prisons. But as the silence stretched, a choice loomed heavier. Stay locked in pride and pain? Or risk the vulnerability that terrified them both? One evening, Arthur found himself standing in front of the children's center. It was closed for the night, its windows dark, the laughter that had once filled it now just memory. He walked the garden path where they had strolled, where she had asked if they would be happier without their scars. His footsteps echoed her laughter, her questions, her hand in his. He whispered into the quiet, "I'm sorry." The words felt foreign, jagged, but necessary. For the first time in his life, he admitted it aloud, not to a boardroom, not to a mirror, but to the night itself. "I'm afraid. I always have been. And I can't lose her because I'm too much of a coward to say it." Merida, meanwhile, stood backstage at an event, about to be introduced. Cameras waited, lights blazed. But she felt nothing for the glamour, nothing for the applause. Her manager leaned in. "Smile. You're the star." Merida forced a smile, then whispered under her breath, "I don't want to be the star. I just want to be seen." In that moment, she realized, no interview, no magazine cover, no adoration could compare to the way Arthur's gaze had made her feel. Like she was more than a face, more than a body. And she knew then she had a choice. She could keep living in a world where beauty was her prison, or she could fight for a love that scared her but promised freedom. Both stood at their crossroads, alone, aching, trembling with fear. For Arthur, the choice was simple but terrifying. Remain in control, safe but lonely, or risk humiliation and admit he needed her. For Merida, the choice was just as sharp. Walk away and guard her heart, or defy the world and love the man no one else dared to. The storm that had first forced them together was gone. But a storm inside remained. And now, each had to decide, to hide or to reach. The night was alive with city lights. But Arthur's heart raced faster than the traffic below. He stood outside the hotel ballroom where a charity gala was underway, an event Merida was scheduled to attend. He hadn't been invited. He hadn't wanted to come. But something stronger than pride had pulled him here. For days, he'd wrestled with fear. For years, he had let shame rule him. Tonight, he was done letting it win. Inside, Merida glided through the crowd in a deep emerald gown, flawless as always. Cameras flashed, admirers gushed, but she felt none of it. Her eyes kept drifting to the door, even though she had no reason to believe he'd walk through. Until he did. The crowd's chatter faltered as Arthur entered, his large frame impossible to ignore. Whispers rippled instantly. Why is he here? Look at him. Next to her. What a joke. Merida froze, her heart leaping to her throat. Arthur's eyes searched, found hers and held. For a moment, the world narrowed to just the two of them. He moved toward her, each step weighted but steady. By the time he reached her, the crowd had circled in curiosity, waiting for spectacle. Arthur didn't care. His voice, when it came, shook slightly, but carried enough to silence the room. I was wrong, he said. Merida's breath caught. I let fear and shame blind me, he continued, eyes locked on hers. I thought you'd see me the way the world does. Ugly, unworthy. So I pushed you away before you could confirm it. His voice cracked, but he pressed on. But the truth is, I've never seen anyone more clearly than I see you. And I love you. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Cameras clicked wildly. But all Merida heard was the pounding of her own heart. Tears blurred her vision. For days she had waited, prayed he would choose vulnerability. And now, here he was. Slowly, she stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. Do you know why I stayed, Arthur? Why I defended you when everyone else mocked? He swallowed, barely daring to breathe. Because when you looked at me, she whispered, you didn't see beauty. You saw me. And I love you for that. The room erupted with murmurs, disbelief, even laughter. But Merida didn't care. She reached up, cupping his face with both hands. Let them talk. Let them gossip. The truth is ours, not theirs. And then, before the cameras, before the whispers, she kissed him. Not a fleeting kiss, not a staged kiss, but a kiss that carried all the weight of their scars, their fears, their fragile hope. The ballroom blurred away. The only thing real was them. When they finally pulled apart, Arthur's eyes brimmed with tears he didn't hide. Merida, are you sure? She smiled through her own tears. For the first time in my life, I'm sure of something. Applause broke out, not from everyone, but from enough. A ripple of support amid the sea of doubt. But even if there had been silence, even if there had been jeers, it wouldn't have mattered. Because for the first time, they weren't alone. Later that night, they slipped away from the chaos, hand in hand. The city was quiet now, the rain beginning to fall again just as it had the first day. Merida tilted her face to the sky, smiling. Seems the rain likes us. Arthur chuckled softly, pulling her closer. Or maybe it's just reminding us where we began. They walked slowly, unhurried, the rain dampening their clothes but warming their hearts. Do you regret it? She asked suddenly. He stopped, turning her to face him. Only that I didn't believe in us sooner. Her eyes glistened. Then believe in us now. That's all I need. They kissed again under the rain, not as a billionaire and the most beautiful woman, not as two people society labeled, but as Arthur and Merida. Two souls who had dared to defy their fears. Their story would not erase the whispers, nor silence every headline. But together they had found the only truth that mattered. Love, unexpected and hard won, but real. And as they held each other beneath the falling rain, both knew, after all the scars, after all the loneliness, that they had finally found home. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.